vitamin B1. So it's actually called B1 because it was the first one discovered. It was actually discovered during a time when Europeans were inhabiting various countries, and they really preferred the white processed rice. So nowadays we are all going back to the whole grains, but they preferred the really expensive rice was the processed rice. But what happened is that people, these Europeans, these rich Europeans living in these Americas and other places that had endogenous populations, these rich Europeans ended up with neurological issues and muscle wasting. So I'll be talking about the deficiencies in a second here. It turns out that thiamine is high in whole grains. And so you didn't see these neurological problems in the endogenous populations of these various countries, but you did see it in the rich Europeans. So that's when they started realizing there was something in these grains, these whole grains, that was missing in the processed grains. And one of those things was thiamine. And so we'll talk about the deficiency related to that, but it's going to be neurological issues, muscle wasting, if you don't get thiamine. But it is in a wide variety of foods, and so typically we don't see thiamine deficiencies, especially in the United States. So its major functions. So its major functions is actually in what does have transmission of nerve impulses, so it is going to assist in that, but also metabolism of carbohydrates. So it's important in decarboxylation reactions. I do have that in the slide, and I think it's a nice slide. Decarboxylation reactions. So for example, if you want to decarboxylate pyruvate and turn it into acetyl-CoA, you have to have thiamine. And imagine if you don't have thiamine, you can't decarboxylate pyruvate. You can't make acetyl-CoA, which means you can't do the Krebs cycle. So you can imagine why that would be difficult for your body. If it can't have thiamine, it can't make a lot of ATP. It's going to have a lot of issues related to that. And it's also decarboxylation, not just with carbohydrates and energy metabolism, but amino acids too. So there's a wide variety of enzymes that require thiamine. So keep in mind your B vitamins, all of them function as coenzymes, meaning you need these B vitamins in order for these important enzymes to function. Without them, these enzymes are not functional. And it's also really important for the breakdown of alcohol in the body. So the key thing you want to remember here are these decarboxylation reactions, which allows your body to properly conduct nerve impulses, allows your body to properly metabolize carbohydrates, as well as amino acids, and break down alcohol. So here's this decarboxylation reaction. So its active form is thymine pyrophosphate. So pyrophosphate, when you see this, think thiamine. For short, we call it TPP. But thymine pyrophosphate, again, really important. The functions, again, coenzyme. All your B vitamins are coenzymes. And in this case, it functions in decarboxylation reactions. And I don't require you to remember the specific reactions like pyruvate to acetyl-CoA or alpha-ketoglutarate to succinyl-CoA. You don't have to remember those exact steps, but do know that it's important for enzymes that do decarboxylation reactions. And that's important for the metabolism of carbohydrates. So again, don't have to memorize these two if you don't want to, but those are two really important pathways in the Krebs cycle. And it's also really important for this enzyme here. Again, I don't care if you remember the enzymes, but this you do need to know. So without thiamine, you cannot make NADPH, which means you're going to have issue with making a wide variety of things because we need transketolase in that pentose phosphate pathway or shunt in order to make NADPH phosphate shunt. So those are the two major pathways, essentially allowing your body to properly make nucleotides as well as break down carbohydrates. So here is just kind of showing some of those reactions. Don't have to memorize these. But here, for example, is where you have ribose turning it into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So this is part of the pentose phosphate pathway or shunt. And this other one is showing you how pyruvate to be converted to acetyl-CoA has to be decarboxylated. You have to get rid of that carbon in order to make acetyl-CoA. Pyruvate's a 3-carbon, acetyl-CoA is a 2-carbon. So you got to get rid of that carbon dioxide. But don't memorize these pathways anymore. You learned them last term. You can remember them for the boards, but for Biochem 2, you don't have to remember those. But these are showing you the decarboxylation reactions. That's what it's doing, thiamine pyrophosphate. All right, what if you do not have enough thiamine? And this can happen, especially with alcohol. So we'll talk about the chronic alcohol syndrome, Wernicke-Korsakoff. But the main deficiency is called beriberi. Beriberi is, so whenever you hear this term, that's vitamin B1. I keep trying to remember to look that up, why it's called beriberi. But I keep forgetting to. But it is associated with severe malnutrition. Because you have thiamine in a wide variety of foods, it doesn't usually happen. So it is typically some sort of severe malnutrition associated with that. And it can cause a couple different things. So there's dry beriberi, this versus wet beriberi. Don't have to remember dry versus wet. I don't really care if you remember that either. But it results in peripheral neuropathy, so essentially you end up with neurological issues as well as cardiac failure and edema. So these are the major deficiency symptoms related to a thiamine deficiency. So getting more specific, you can have loss of appetite, weight, memory, confusion, paralysis, and extreme wasting of muscle tissues. Again, rare in the United States, but beriberi is the name of the deficiency syndrome related to thiamine deficiency. Again, peripheral neuropathy, cardiac failure, edema, muscle wasting, these are key symptoms of thiamine deficiency. Oh, and related to alcohol, so when you have, alcohol is going to interfere with thiamine absorption, and alcohol interferes with the absorption of everything. Excessive alcohol will cause the microvilli in the gut to lie down, meaning you can't absorb these nutrients properly. And especially thiamine is associated with this. So you can have a severe thiamine deficiency, even more so than some of the other vitamin deficiencies related to alcohol. And so specifically this one's called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, a brain disorder related to alcohol consumption that causes a severe thiamine deficiency. All right, so with this one, unlike vitamin B6, like we talked about last week, there's no known toxicity. So again, water-soluble vitamins tend to not be toxic. Some of them do have an upper tolerable limit or level set, usually not related to toxicity though. It's folate, for example. The UL for folate was set in order, why was it set? So it's not toxic, but you don't want to disguise a what? A B12 deficiency. Vitamin C, not toxic, but a UL was set because it does cause gastrointestinal issues if you take large doses of vitamin C. This one, again, no known toxicity. If you were to Google it, you probably will find some toxicity somewhere with excessive intake, but generally speaking, no known toxicity, no UL for thiamine. All right, niacin. Niacin, vitamin B3. Again, I don't care if you remember these numbers, but they might be important for the boards. All right, niacin is also known as nicotinic acid or nicotinamide. This is what we see in this guy, NAD. So nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. We tend to not call out its full name. niacin for? It's important for a lot of energy metabolism pathways, the glycolysis cycle, the TCA-Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain is taking those electrons from NAD. So this one's really important for oxidation reduction reactions. Essentially, it's needed to carry electrons. You need niacin to make this nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or NAD, in order to conduct these oxidation reduction reactions. And really all you're doing is carrying electrons. That's what NAD does. It grabs electrons and carries them to the electron transport chain, or it can donate electrons if it has them. So that's its important function. Oxidation reduction reactions, carrying electrons. It's found in a wide variety of foods. So again, we don't tend to see deficiencies related to this. And if you recall, we can synthesize niacin as well from the amino acid tryptophan, although we don't tend to make enough, so we do recommend getting it from the diet. We do consider it an essential vitamin. All right, so again, lots of reactions requiring niacin as NAD. So you don't have to identify any of the structures, but in case you want to see what it looks like, here is nicotinamide or niacin. It's going to be added to nicotinamide in order to make NAD, and then you can make NADH or NADPH. Here is NAD+. So when it accepts an electron, so when it's accepting an electron here, it becomes NADH. So it's carrying electrons in oxidation reduction reactions. All right, deficiencies and toxicity. So this is the deficiency. The deficiency is pellagra. Pellagra. And the symptoms of pellagra are the 3 Ds. Dermatitis, so you can see the dermatitis here in this individual, diarrhea, and dementia. And sometimes they add a 4th D, which is death. So if left untreated, it can be fatal. But the 3 Ds, dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia, that's pellagra. Pellagra is a niacin deficiency. All right, toxicities. So, it's not super toxic. However, it can cause severe flushing. You will turn bright red. I have a friend of mine, I don't know, it's taken as a supplement by some people to try to help with the energy pathways or to enhance energy. And so some people take it for that reason, niacin. And I've seen a friend of mine took it. We were actually on a trip, I think we were in Turkey, and he took it and he literally turned like the brightest red. And it was a splotchy red. And that's what I mean by flushing. So it can cause flushing. Essentially, you get this inflammation. It's prostaglandin mediated. You don't have to remember that part. But it can cause itching as well. Aspirin can reduce it. It's not fatal. It's not that big of a deal. But that's the main side effect of it. We do see it because of its function in these energy pathways. We do use it. Physicians will sometimes prescribe it to treat hyperlipidemia. So hyper means high lipids. So it's sometimes prescribed in high doses, 40 times the UL. So there is a UL to prevent flushing. Again, don't have to memorize the numbers, but the upper tolerable level was set because of the flushing. However, physicians will prescribe it sometimes at 40 times the dose. And this has been shown to decrease blood LDL, cholesterol, triglycerides, and increase HDLs. So it is used in some patients with cardiovascular disease. So essentially large doses will inhibit lipolysis and adipose tissue, decrease free fatty acid supply to the liver, and that's going to lower VLDLs and LDLs. Because remember, LDLs are made from VLDLs. So if you can decrease the amount of lipids, then you can decrease the LDLs, decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease. Don't have to remember this part if you don't want to. Keep it simple. You should know, because this is an interesting characteristic of it, that it is used as a hyperlipidemia treatment. So if someone has high blood levels of cholesterol or lipids, that some physicians will prescribe this that has been shown to decrease those lipids in the blood. So I do want you to know this part, and I do want you to know the side effect is flushing, and that's why the UL was sent. Basics, yeah. I don't care if you remember any of these numbers. You can look them up. You can look them up later if you ever need to give them to a client or a patient or whatever it might be. You do need to know there is a UL. So know the ones that have a UL, know the ones that don't have it. And if they do have a UL, know why the UL was set. So this one was set because it can cause severe flushing. I always picture my friend every time I say that, so that's why I laugh every time I talk about it. He was not happy about it. All right, B2, so another B vitamin, which means it's another coenzyme here. So riboflavin is another one that you've already seen a lot of last term, and actually this term we talked about it as two. So this one is flavin adenine dinucleotide, FAD. We haven't so much talked about flavin mononucleotide, but you have to make that one in order to make the flavin adenine dinucleotide. So FAD is this really important one. We've seen this a lot. Again, important in energy metabolism for oxidation reduction reactions. So the same thing as niacin, we need it for oxidation reduction reactions. And it's a variety of enzymes that require it. So, for example, to take succinyl-CoA and turn it into succinate, we make it FADH2, and in that case, and that's part of the TCA cycle. Don't have to remember that anymore, but you do need to know that that is where we see a lot of this riboflavin. So riboflavin is a very important component of FAD in order to make FADH2. Which is important for a lot of energy pathways. So these enzymes, NADH dehydrogenase, succinate dehydrogenase, these are just example enzymes that are going to be using riboflavin as FAD, not NADH. And by the way, I've mentioned this before, whenever you see dehydrogenase, these are all enzymes that are either going to require FAD or NAD. So all of these, if it's an enzyme it has the last name dehydrogenase, it's going to require either FAD or NAD. That's just something to keep in mind, because dehydrogenases are enzymes involved in oxidation reduction reactions. And here's the structure. So here's riboflavin on its way to making flavin adenine dinucleotide, or FAD. Again, don't have to recognize the structures, but it's good to be able to see what it looks like. All right, now deficiencies and toxicities related to riboflavin. Not commonly a single deficiency, but accompany other vitamin deficiencies. So in this case, we really don't see a lot of deficiencies related to it, unless it's associated with other B vitamins. When we have a general B vitamin deficiency and including a riboflavin deficiency, we do see this. So sore throat, swelling inside mouth, inflamed purplish red tongue, dry scaly lips. Do you have a picture of that? No, I don't. So this is essentially a symptom of, typically they're going to give back all the B vitamins, not just riboflavin. I don't want to say this is absolutely specific to it, but generally speaking, this is the symptoms related to a vitamin B2 deficiency or riboflavin deficiency. This one's not very interesting, so I don't usually ask this one on the test. But purplish red lips, I have seen that before with a riboflavin deficiency, so that can occur. Sore throat, swelling inside mouth. So again, very, very rare that we see this one though. And no toxicity for this one, and no UL. So riboflavin pretty simple. Not a whole lot going on. Really important for oxidation production reactions related to FAD, FADH2. No toxicity and not really a major deficiency. Purplish red lips, not fatal. Get back to B vitamins and it'll be okay. All right. Oh, I created it. All right, so this one, biotin. Super simple, biotin as well. This one is, again, widely distributed in foods. We don't really see deficiencies. It is also synthesized by intestinal bacteria. What I would remember about this one, if I were a student and if I were taking the boards, avidin. Avidin in raw eggs binds to biotin. So if someone's drinking, consuming raw eggs, then that can bind up biotin. And now, this used to be a thing. I don't think it is anymore. I haven't noticed people drinking raw eggs. Maybe they do. But if you were to do this on a regular, chronic basis, drink raw eggs, then you may end up with a biotin deficiency. So dermatitis, hair loss, appetite loss, and that's going to be chronic intake of raw eggs. If you were to drink some raw eggs right now, no big deal. But chronically, daily, weekly, drinking raw eggs, you could end up with these deficiency symptoms. And this is what I would ask you on the exam if I did ask you about biotin. I would really focus on the fact that avidin raw eggs will bind to it. That's a very common characteristic that we know about biotin. All right, so we didn't talk about its function yet. So what is its function? It functions in carboxylation reactions. Yeah. So carboxylation reactions, not decarboxylation, carboxylation. So for example, when we have to carboxylate pyruvate to make oxaloacetate, you need biotin because pyruvate's a 3-carbon molecule and you got to make a 4-carbon oxaloacetate. How do you do that? You got to add a carbon to it. You need biotin in order to help add that enzyme to add, it's actually pyruvate carboxylase. So pyruvate's going to be carboxylated to make oxaloacetate, going from a 3-carbon pyruvate to a 4-carbon oxaloacetate. That's a detail you don't need to know, but you do need to know it's important for carboxylation enzymes that carboxylate things. And don't worry about the, so some people can have a genetic inability to attach or remove biotin in these carboxylases, but you can supplement. So I wouldn't ask you about this genetic deficiency related to that. But carboxylation reactions, avidin in raw eggs may cause someone to be deficient. So again, coenzyme in carboxylation reactions. It moves carbons around is what it does. It's widespread in food, also synthesized by intestinal bacteria, so we really don't see deficiencies unless you eat a lot of raw eggs. And here's the structure of biotin. Here is biotin when it is bound by an enzyme. So here's the enzyme binding to biotin, allowing it to now do carboxylation reactions. All right, any questions about biotin? So again, not really deficiency unless you have a lot of raw eggs and binding by avidin. Very good. Pantothenic acid. So pantothenic acid, also pretty simple. So this is another vitamin that's really important for energy pathways. CoA. CoA stands for coenzyme A. Coenzyme A is pantothenic acid, essentially. So all of the acetyl-CoA, fatty acyl-CoA, so when you have to add a coenzyme A to the fatty acids, all of these energy pathways, you need a coenzyme A to activate things. To activate fatty acid, you need a coenzyme A. What is coenzyme A? It's pantothenic acid, which is an important B vitamin. Actually, I don't know which B vitamin it is. So when it comes to, so again, coenzyme A, really important for activating various fatty acids. So acetyl-CoA, succinyl-CoA, fatty acyl-CoA, A. Every time you've seen a CoA, you needed pantothenic acid to make that coenzyme A. It's widespread in foods, so you don't really see deficiencies so much related to this. There's not really deficiencies and not really a UL. However, so again, deficiency of these vitamins are rare. Biotin deficiency causes various things like hair loss, skin rash, dermatitis, fatigue, nausea, and that's related to avidin. I don't know why this is on this page. Okay, so sorry, this is here, but this is about biotin, not pantothenic acid. I probably should have fixed that last time. There is a deficiency related to pantothenic acid, but it's kind of shaky. It's basically burning feet syndrome, and exactly what it sounds like. Your feet burn. In fact, I don't think we've ever seen the burning feet syndrome except during World War II, and that was because soldiers would come back and they would have not had good nutrition, and they would be would lack a lot of their vitamins, not just pantothenic acid, but they do associate burning feet syndrome to pantothenic acid. I feel like studies need to be done on that. So regardless, there's not a major deficiency related to pantothenic acid. And I won't ask you this on the exam, but if you did see it somewhere, it's burning feet syndrome is related to a deficiency in pantothenic acid. And your feet just burn, or at least you have the neural stimulation as if your feet are burning. All right, but otherwise, no UL, no major deficiency for pantothenic acid. I don't know why I had it on that page. Oh well, okay, moving on. All right, so those were your water-soluble vitamins. So again, a lot of these, except for vitamin C, the rest of them are B vitamins. So folate, biotin, pantothenic acid, B12, B1, riboflavin, niacin, pyridoxine, which is your B6. And they all function as coenzymes. And vitamin C functions as a coenzyme as well in hydroxylation reactions for making of collagen, so you got to hydroxylate proline and lysine. Vitamin C is also has a function that's not related to enzymes, and that is a water-soluble antioxidant. So vitamin C is also a water-soluble antioxidant on top of being a coenzyme. All right, any questions about your water-soluble? We're doing great. We're going to have review time tomorrow. All right, so the last pieces are the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, K, and E. Starting with vitamin A, I think. All right, you got to know the scientific names, just like for the B vitamins and vitamin C, which is ascorbate. So vitamin A, these are going to be, there's a few of them, but these are going to be your retinols or retinoids. Vitamin D is going to be calcitriol, and I'm going to give you another one that's going to be a really long. Okay, I'm going to just write it here. It's going to be 125, I'm not going to write it out, dihydroxycholcalciferol. It's a mouthful. You'll see it later. But calcitriol is the one that most people are most familiar with. Vitamin E is going to be tocopherol. And tocopherol, you might have seen this one in ingredients list. It's actually a natural preservative because vitamin E is a major antioxidant. Vitamin C is as well. So vitamin E is often used in ingredients. Food companies that are trying to use a more natural preservative instead of some of the other crap they put in our foods. So if you see tocopherol in the ingredients list, that's just vitamin E. And vitamin K, its fancy scientific name is M-E-minoquinone. M-minoquinone. And so I have all these listed out when we talk about each one, but you do need to know what their scientific terminology is. And these, again, are fat-soluble vitamins. I just rolled that out. So if you were to take a multivitamin, you need to eat food first. You need to stimulate your bile because otherwise you're not going to absorb your fat-soluble vitamins. So if you were to take a supplement of vitamin E, Without food, you're not going to absorb it. So if you want to absorb your fat-soluble vitamins, you really need to take them with food, especially with fat, and that's going to help with their absorption because these guys are going to be carried by chylomicrons. So they're going to be carried with fats. So what does fat in the duodenum stimulate? Well, it starts with a B. Bile. So you need bile in order to absorb those, and you need to, they're going to be transported via those chylomicrons. Same as all the other fats. All right, we're going to start with vitamin A. These are your retinols or retinoids. There's a wide variety of names to this. Retinol, retinal, retinoic acid. It depends on its function. And this is one that has a few functions. So, and it's also a really important one. So this one's got a few things going on. This is the structure depending on which one you're looking at. You can see they're all slightly different from each other, but also very similar. The dietary sources is also important with this one. These are kind of special characteristics of vitamin A because it has two different kind of sources. One is an active or preformed vitamin A. This one's found in animal sources. So vitamin A is stored in the liver. So the liver is always a good food if you want to get your vitamin A. If you like liver. Liver and onions, fried liver and onions. Anyone grow up with that?
Yeah.
Some of them. Some of them did. It's one of my mother's favorite foods. Yeah. All right. Actually, I liked it growing up. All right, liver, eggs, butter, milk. Again, animal sources have a lot of this. It's retinol. This is the preformed vitamin A. The pro-vitamin A, this is the inactive vitamin A. This is beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is this really large molecule that can be split in half, and you can make vitamin A out of it. So if you're eating beta-carotene, and this one's found in plants, orange plants. So orange plants, carrots have a lot of beta-carotene, which means you can make vitamin A out of it. Sweet potatoes, spinach, green foods like romaine will have beta-carotene as well. It's just going to be not as high, so it's not orange. But typically pumpkin, squash, and essentially beta-carotene can be converted to vitamin A in the body. So that's why it's called a provitamin form, because it's not vitamin A yet. It's going to have to be turned into an active vitamin A form after you consume it. And this one, again, is stored in the liver, which is going to be important because it's going to be related to toxicities. Keep in mind, lipid-soluble vitamins tend to be toxic. And so these guys are, and it's because you can store lipid-soluble vitamins much more easily in the body, which means they can build up in the body. All right, functions. There's a few functions for this one. This is an important one. Some students missed this on the exam, and I thought I'd try to make it really clear. So it works in the nucleus, and it affects the expression of hundreds of genes in the nucleus. So it will activate transcription factors which regulate gene expression, which means it can affect potentially hundreds of genes, which can affect a wide variety of things in your body. So it's really hard to narrow down everything that vitamin A might be affecting, all the different genes that vitamin A might be affecting. And that's because it binds to, and these are details I'm not too worried if you remember, but there's this retinoic acid receptor in the nucleus that's going to bind to response elements regulating transcription. If you don't want to memorize all that, at least remember that vitamin A, as retinoic acid, can go into the nucleus and affect gene expression. That's the gist. That's the general picture that I want you guys to understand. It affects gene expression. Important for lots of things. These genes can affect cell differentiation, which is how your cells mature and differentiate into their different functions of the body. It'll affect the immune response, bone growth, healthy skin, which is going to come down to this next part here. It's really going to be important for treatment of acne. It's got a major dermatological use for treatment of acne as Accutane. So Accutane. I won't write it down because I don't want you to have to memorize that. But it is going to be, that's a major interesting characteristic of vitamin A is its dermatological use for treatment of acne. And again, that's because it's out of its job in affecting gene expression, and it'll affect cell differentiation, immune response, healthy skin, all of that related to its ability to go into the nucleus and affect gene expression. Is what? Oh, yeah. So women have to be especially careful when it comes to vitamin A supplementation. The dermatological uses, it's excessive amounts of vitamin A. So they are very careful when someone is taking this Accutane or the specific variety, because if you take too much of it, it can cause deformation of the fetus, and so they are very careful about people taking the excess quantities of vitamin A. So they have to watch, especially if women are taking vitamin A to treat acne. They will, I think they have to go in like every few weeks to make sure they're not pregnant before they can get another increase their prescription for vitamin A. And the last function is vision, or I should say it's the last. It's a really important. And this allows, again, I'm not going to worry about the details for this, but essentially you need it to turn on this protein rhodopsin in the eye, allowing your rods to see. So without vitamin A, you can end up with night blindness and potentially total blindness without vitamin A. And we do see this in, again, developing countries that don't have enough vitamin A in their diet. It's the number one cause of blindness in children, of vitamin A deficiency. And we'll talk about that as we move on. So important for vision, which is this picture. Oh, so this is the one showing its function to retinoic acid in the nucleus. So it's going to bind to transcription factors that will affect gene expression. And so again, really important, which means it's going to affect potentially hundreds of different genes, which means we don't really know exactly all the genes that it might be affecting. All right, so vitamin A deficiency, we'll start with deficiencies, and then we'll get to toxicities. So a deficiency causes night blindness. Again, that's his job in vision for being able to form that rhodopsin in order for your vision to occur. We won't go through those details. But if you have a prolonged vitamin A deficiency, it can lead to total blindness. Essentially, it's called xerophthalmia. You have a dryness of the cornea, conjunctiva. Essentially, if left untreated, that will cause total blindness. And it is the number one cause of preventable blindness in children. In fact, vitamin A, I think it was in China, they genetically modified rice because that's such a major consumption product in China. They genetically modified it to carry vitamin A because it's not naturally in vitamin A in order to try to prevent night blindness or total blindness in children. And they have seen some success with that. Not always for genetic modification, but I don't know, sometimes it might be worth it. All right, deficiency, again, night blindness. You can also, again, because of its various functions in gene expression, stunted bone growth, reduced resistance to infection, because if you don't have enough vitamin A, it can reduce the effectiveness of your immune system. But blindness, night blindness, is a major deficiency issue related to it. Toxicity. So toxicity, it can be, first off, it can be fatal, but this is only for active vitamin A. So hypervitaminosis A, that's what it's called, pretty simple to remember, and it's excessive intake of vitamin A. You get dry skin, which is why, it does help with people who have acne. It can help alleviate some of the oily skin. Because it's stored in the liver, you'll have an enlarged liver, intracranial pressure. You can have liver toxicity. I was looking for it. Liver toxicity, which can be fatal. Birth defects, a wide variety of issues related to vitamin A toxicity. So that's why people have to be careful with taking excessive doses of there is a UL. I don't know why there's not on here, but there is definitely a UL for vitamin A. I don't know the specific number, but there is a UL because it is very toxic in excess. This other thing over here, and again, I laugh because a friend of mine did this in college, an undergraduate. He was studying, he was really hyper-focused on health, and he was working out all the time, and he heard that beta-carotene was a good antioxidant, and it actually is. Beta-carotene on its own, if it's not converted to vitamin A, can actually function as an antioxidant. And so he was taking large doses of beta-carotene supplement, and he literally turned orange. He turned orange. It's okay. It's not fatal, but it did take a few weeks of him not taking vitamin, or just a couple of weeks of him not taking beta-carotene before he turned back his normal color, because beta-carotene is an orange pigmented molecule, and so it will accumulate in your skin if you take beta-carotene supplements, and so you will turn orange, and that's what hyperkeratosis is. You will turn orange. Not fatal, not dangerous. You just turn orange. Yeah, and non-threatening. So that's the toxicity and deficiencies related to vitamin A. No questions. All right. So vitamin D. So we're actually, we're going to go in and do this one real quick. All right, vitamin D. So this one has, you can get it from plants. It's called an ergocalciferol. You can get it from plants, but typically we don't. We get it from sunshine or fortified foods. That tends to be where we get it. Because this is the sunshine vitamin. We get it from the sun. You have this cholecalciferol, this cholesterol form, 7-dehydrocholesterol in your skin. Sunlight hits that 7-dehydrocholesterol, converts it into cholecalciferol, which is an inactive vitamin D form. So why is it important? Large bone maintenance team. So it is extremely important for absorption of dietary calcium. You cannot absorb calcium without vitamin D. So how does it function? Like vitamin A, so vitamin A and vitamin D can both do this. They can go into the nucleus and affect gene expression. And this is a major function of vitamin D. Vitamin D modifies upwards of over 1,000 genes. We have no idea all the genes this guy is affecting, which is why a lot of researchers are looking at it with depression, cardiovascular disease, cancer, because it affects so many different genes. We don't really know the entire the whole area of things that it might be affecting. But we do know how it helps us absorb calcium, and I'm going to tell you now. So essentially, you get vitamin D will go into the nucleus. So here's a cell, here's the nucleus. So vitamin D can go into the nucleus, and it's going to turn on expression of Calbindin? I have to make sure I remember what it is.
What is up in the chair?
No yawning. This is exciting stuff, people. Yeah, it is calbindin. We got this. Calbindin. Calbindin is a transporter that transports oxygen. Not transports oxygen. Transports calcium. I'm talking about oxygen in physiology lab. Transports calcium. So without calbindin, you cannot transport calcium. And vitamin D is what goes into the nucleus and causes expression of calbindin. So it expresses the gene, expresses calbindin gene. And so now you can transport calcium. So it's really important as a transcription factor affecting thousands of genes, and one of those genes that affects is calbindin. So without vitamin D, you can't actually transport and bring calcium into the body. But there's other things it affects too: immune function, neuromuscular function, cell growth, a lot of different genes. But the main thing you want to focus on is the fact that we need it to transport calcium. All right, the active form. The active form is calcitriol, but this is the other word for it. The active form of vitamin D is called 1,25-dihydrocolcalciferol. That's the other scientific name that, yeah, I just know it. 1,25-dihydrocolcalciferol. Not that bad. Dihydroxy, sorry. And actually the hydroxy is the important part because you get, that's where the 1 and 25. So there is a hydroxylation at carbon number 25 and carbon 1. That's why it's called 125 because there's a hydroxyl group. Remember what a hydroxyl group is? This guy is a hydroxyl group. There's a hydroxyl group at carbon 25 and a carbon 1. And that's really important to remember too, because you have to have a fully functional liver and kidney to make a fully functional 125-dihydroxycolcalciferol. Essentially, if your kidneys are failing or your liver is failing, you cannot make active vitamin D, which means you need to supplement with active vitamin D. So if you ever work in an area with people on kidney failure, liver failure, they will need an active vitamin D form because they can't make their own because their liver and or kidney is failing. So that's a special characteristic of vitamin D you should know. You have to have a fully functional liver and kidney to make active vitamin D. 125-dihydroxycolcalciferol. And that's because in the liver is where it gets its first hydroxylation and the kidneys is where it gets its second hydroxylation. You don't have to remember that part, but that's why the liver and kidney are important. All right, again, it's called the sunshine vitamin, made with the help of sunlight. You do need cholesterol to make vitamin D from sunshine. And essentially, you have a cholesterol compound in the skin. It's called 7-dihydrocholesterol. I don't care if you remember that name, but that's what it's called. A cholesterol compound in the skin. You need that sunshine hits it, and you make cholecalciferol, which is vitamin D3. That's what they actually measure when they measure your vitamin D status. They measure vitamin D3. But vitamin D3 is actually not active. Vitamin D3 is cholecalciferol. It hasn't been hydroxylated yet. So once you make cholecalciferol, first it has to go to the kidney and the liver to get its hydroxylations in order to form the active calcitriol. So you need the 125-dihydroxycolcalciferol, and that is going to be made via the liver and the kidney. So the skin makes cholecalciferol, and the liver and kidney turns it into 125-dihydroxycolcalciferol. So people with insufficient sunlight must meet their needs through the diet. And that is happening fairly often. I'm surprised at how many people are not getting enough sunlight. Especially children playing too many video games, guys. Staying indoors all the time. Yeah.
So if you're getting it through your diet and then you take, say you get like your lab done, your vitamin D is low, is that cool? Measuring the vitamin D?
So what is really interesting to me is that I don't think we have a good estimate of vitamin D levels in the body. For example, African Americans or Africans, people with the darker skin tend to have strongest bones. Their bones tend to be stronger. But yet they tend to somehow have low levels of vitamin D3. And what I'm trying to say here is that we're measuring vitamin D3 in the blood, which is actually not the active vitamin D form, which is in the cells. So how do we get a good estimate of what the active vitamin D is in the cells to really reflect whether or not someone is adequate in vitamin D? So vitamin D3, to me, I think that we're missing something. We're not getting the full picture because how do you have really strong bones and low vitamin D? Usually it's, yeah. So to me, that we're missing ways to really measure adequacy in a lot of these vitamins, and vitamin D is just one of those. Like, just looking at blood levels of vitamins doesn't really tell us if someone's adequate, because we can't really see what's in the tissues unless we take biopsies, and that doesn't happen. I don't want anyone taking a biopsy of me. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, blood levels, we're just measuring the inactive vitamin D form, and that to me is not the best way. But there's not really any other way, so we do what we can with what we can measure. I just think there's something weird going on. All right, so we are going to take a break because we're going to get to how calcium is regulated, and you guys need a little more brain space for that. Yeah, so I already said this quickly, 9319. We'll meet back in 10 minutes to find out how vitamin D is regulated.
Those are going outside. I will melt and die though.
Understandable.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be an excuse absent. So we can take a look on Tuesday or yes. It's Chelsea trial, exactly. And the other, so you can call it 125 dihydroxycalciferol, it's the same thing as calciferol. Those are the same thing, and they're the active. I would know calciferol and lactose.
It's understanding where I'm going. That's a good way to speak.
Water soluble, yeah.
It's really
Yeah, we'll get to them. But we're not going to go into depth. We're going to be like big snapshot. Yeah, this is brief too, but we'll give it brief.
You want to be great, bro. Not dream chasing.
What did she do? She didn't even do nothing.
So, again, like, I was so if someone asks me, like, when I don't do this, I usually don't know. It's usually because I didn't know hard enough or I didn't sit right. So, I'm trying to, like, for this, I need to know, functions, efficiency, toxicity, special characteristics. So, I would personally a table where I had all the vitamins and all of that, and then I would spend as much time as I needed to memorize things. And that's where you might not have spent enough time. I know that well, but you have to spend and that's where it differs. Like one person might spend only 30 minutes memorizing all the vitamin stuff, whereas someone else spends 3 hours. And that's where I think it's like, this is what you I would answer the question. Yeah. So I would like that's what you need to know. I would that's all you need to know as far as is it enough? That depends on how much you need to study. But I would definitely yeah. Oh, absolutely. Okay, so the question at the end are no all of the Don't do something else. Anything but. Yeah. But otherwise, I would think
Dead center. Sternal
the special characteristics like vitamin B12 is water soluble vitamin. Whereas the liquid soluble vitamins, all of them. So yeah, it's just vitamin D is made from gut bacteria. That's actually where we get there's also amount of vitamin K in this diet. So little things like that you know, yeah, what are vitamins. Vitamin D and vitamin A work in gene regulation. So they actually that's something interesting about them. You don't see any interest. Not all of them have the yeah, that's anything that makes them unique and something that might be special. I mean, I think, like, so I think I told you guys, like, if I have any numbers, vitamin B12 is called, like, I don't know. I don't think the numbers are, so I don't. But maybe you did. Not for my but you don't know, no, you won't, like, no numbers as far as RDAs, you will, don't memorize that. You need to
I like
yeah, but it. So it's the one that does so. Yeah. So that's the transamination reaction. Actually, that might not be because I would say that thiamine. Oh, B6 isn't in there. You don't. Yeah. So transamination is B6. Decarboxylation is B1. But I don't have that as one of the answers there, which is fine because. Yeah. Decarboxylation. Yes. Yeah. Definitely. So the legacy group are still so.
Oh, is that what happened? Yeah, wait, you actually fell asleep. Girl, I thought you were just laying down. You were on the ground for 30 seconds. I thought you were on the ground.
That's where it originates. But yeah, we're not doing remediation for this group of students. And so I don't know if there's like a physical reason, but I do know that this is
I didn't know they didn't.
Well, they told us to not do it, so I don't know, like, what's going on. I mean, you could tell them that, you could email them, whoever it was that said that, and say, like, I will take whatever it is that comes my way. They told us not to do it. And I would say this, so generally speaking, that's why you can either do it and credit with, or
Many lectures,
rather than not.
the 10 points that I have.
So I still think that you're better off doing that.
But I have,
Because
I was actually,
remediation,
I was actually trying to figure out all
has not raised.
exactly pretty much.
I don't know who told me that, and maybe they meant to say like,
I've seen a reason.
which, I don't know.
No, it's not Coach Rupp. That was not the thing.
But I ended up having to feel free to emails. I mean,
No.
But they're the ones that told us your group shouldn't be. But I said that the instructor in those classes might have just chosen. Alright guys, we're gonna get started again. So this is going to be a little bit more brain power perhaps than you want to use. And now like half of you are gone, so, or more than half of you. No, I have allowed you to get, do you guys want review tomorrow or no review tomorrow? Alright, then we know to get started right now.
Give us a bonus question for staying.
Alright, I'm gonna have a question on parathyroid hormone, how about that? Alright, let's get going. So essentially we need to talk about how calcium is regulated. As much as I don't wanna, I would rather not coach biochemistry. So you guys but I want you to know this information. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm kind of stuck with it. Like they gave me this, and I'm gonna do my job. All right. So when it comes to vitamin D, remember it's really important for calcium levels. To maintain calcium levels, you need vitamin D. So we're going to talk about, and this is all written out over here, but I'm going to draw out my own little pathway with it because I prefer doing it that way. All right. So let's say we have low blood calcium, and let's talk about what's going to happen if we have low blood calcium. So if you have low blood calcium, that is going to cause the release of parathyroid hormone. I'm going to write just PTH. PTH stands for parathyroid hormone. Here you go. PTH is parathyroid hormone. PTH. So PTH is going to do a few different things. First off, it is going to go, it is going to increase production of active vitamin D, which is, I'm just going to write calcitriol. So it's going to make active vitamin D. What is calcitriol going to do? Calcitriol is going to go to the intestine and kidneys. And when it goes to the intestine and the kidneys, it's going to go into the nucleus. So calcitriol, calcitriol is going to then, calcitriol is going to induce expression of calbindin. And calbindin is going to transport calcium. So essentially in the intestine, you're going to be able to absorb calcium in the intestine from your diet. So if you don't have vitamin D, you can't make calbindin, you're not absorbing calcium from your diet. So no matter how much milk you drink or spinach you eat, because calcium is high in spinach too, you're not going to be able to absorb calcium. And the kidneys, what is it doing in the kidneys? Kidneys are where you excrete calcium. So in the kidneys, vitamin D is going to increase production of cowbindin, and so you can reabsorb calcium. So you're going to increase absorption of calcium is what's going to happen. If you don't have vitamin D, you can't make cowbindin, which means you can't absorb calcium. So that's one thing parathyroid hormone is going to do. It's going to increase production of active vitamin D, which is going to allow you to make cowbindin, which is going to allow you to better absorb calcium. And that's kind of what this says over here. So low calcium in the blood causes parathyroid hormone to be released. Parathyroid hormone is going to increase production of calcitriol. Calcitriol is going to upregulate the calcium transporter cowbindin. And that is going to allow you to increase absorption of calcium and decrease renal excretion. So essentially, you're going to conserve calcium instead of excrete it. So you're going to maintain calcium in the body, essentially. It's going to do something else too. So not only does parathyroid hormone increase production of active vitamin D, but it's also going to cause bone resorption. Bone resorption. What is bone resorption? This is dissolving of bone. That's what resorption means. You dissolve bone. Yeah, PTH, parathyroid hormone, causes bone resorption, which means you're dissolving bone. What just happened there? When you dissolve bone, what do you put out into the blood? Calcium into the blood. So both of these things are going to increase blood calcium. So when you transport and absorb more calcium, both of these things are going to increase blood calcium. And that was the whole point, right? You wanted to increase calcium because you had low blood calcium. And so parathyroid hormone, its entire function is to increase blood calcium. That's what it's trying to do. So parathyroid hormone is released when calcium levels are low, and it causes you to increase blood calcium. That's what the end result will be, to increase blood calcium. Increase blood calcium. So you will lose calcium from the bones to maintain blood calcium. So your bones are actually a reservoir of calcium. If you don't have calcium, your muscles can't contract and your neurons do not work. And so blood calcium is way more important than having calcium in your bones, which is why you will become osteoporotic. You will lose calcium from your bones if you don't get calcium from your diet. That's why calcium in your diet is important. Cause you to what? You would lose calcium from your bones if you don't get enough from your diet. So that's why calcium is essential in your diet, because your bones will become weak if you're constantly having to dissolve them because you're not getting calcium from food. But if you get calcium in your diet, then you won't lose as much from your bones. But your bones are not as important as nervous conduction or muscle contraction. And that's why you have to maintain blood calcium. If blood calcium starts to dip, then your muscles won't be able to contract anymore, and as more importantly, your neurons will not work. Because you need that in order to send neural synaptic information. Yeah.
Would you also more fragile or brittle bones with lack of calcium?
Yeah, your bones essentially will become brittle, essentially, yeah. Which makes you more likely to fracture, which is osteoporosis. So people have low calcium in their diet, you see it a lot in ballerinas because they have to have this certain frame and lightness. They tend to have really inadequate diets, and as they get older, sometimes just in their 20s and 30s, they can fracture really easily. So, an inadequate diets of calcium can cause fracture of your bones, causing your bones to become brittle and fracture easily.
So does parathyroid hormone impact osteoclasts to do this, or is this just another one?
No, that is that pathway. So they basically activate osteoclasts, causing them to dissolve bones. All right, so that's the major component of vitamin D. So there's other things related to calcium that we're not going to go into detail about, but I do want you to know how at least parathyroid hormone works in relation to activating calcitriol and helping us absorb calcium from food and preventing us from excreting too much from our kidneys. So the whole point is to increase. So we have low blood calcium, we need to increase it. This picture is just showing you how vitamin D, so vitamin D will go, here's a cell, vitamin D goes into the nucleus and it causes gene transcription, and this is specifically right here, this is calbindin. So it's increasing expression in the nucleus of the gene calbindin, and then this way it creates a transporter that can now bring calcium in from our diet. So without vitamin D, you can't make calbindin, you can't properly absorb calcium from your diet, because you need calbindin in order to absorb calcium from your diet. And so vitamin D works in the nucleus, affecting gene expression of calbindin. And this is also showing how parathyroid hormone will cause calcium to be dissolved from bones in order to increase blood calcium. There's a few things going on in this picture. We're not going to worry about some of this stuff though, so I don't want to go into it too much. We're not going to talk about calcitonin. All right, vitamin D, again, we synthesize it from sunshine. 10 to 15 minutes of exposed hands and face typically is enough, depending on where you live. Again, we take vitamin D in the skin. This is a cholesterol molecule. It's 7-dehydrogenated cholesterol. It's got to go to the liver to get its first hydroxylation. So it's going to be hydroxylated at carbon number 25. And then it's got to go to the kidneys to be hydroxylated at carbon number 1 here. And so that's why we end up with 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. So again, you need sunshine, cholesterol, a functional liver, and a functional kidney in order to make active vitamin D. So if you live in a place where there's lots of smog, pollution, decreased sunlight, then that will limit your ability to make active vitamin D. We do get it from some food sources. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are fortified nowadays, like milk has been fortified for a long time. Eggs, liver, we store vitamin D in the liver. We store all your lipid-soluble vitamins in the liver, by the way. So we store in the liver, there's in some foods. Again, I won't really ask you about this because we mostly make it from sunshine. There is a deficiency, and that's related to its effect on bones, on calcium. So the deficiency in children is called rickets, and this is an infant here. You can see the bowed legs, and this bowing is related to the fact that it has weak bones, and so the weight of the legs causes it's bowed out. And so that's called rickets if it's in children. If it's in adults, it's called osteomalacia. So it's the adult equivalent of rickets. You do see this in some, especially Middle Eastern countries where you have adult women who are completely clothed from head to toe. And so they're not getting sunshine. And if they don't have some sort of vitamin D supplement, they can end up with osteomalacia, even if they're living in a place with a lot of sunshine, but they're just not absorbing it because they're completely covered. Which is why you need to think about that, spend a few minutes outside in the sunshine, make sure you get a little bit of vitamin D before you throw on the sunscreen or cover up. Yeah. Okay. Vitamin C? No. Okay.
So what's the difference between this and like osteoporosis?
Osteoporosis is related to a chronic deficiency of calcium over time. It's not related to a lack of vitamin D. It's just related to you're just over so and so many years of your life, you're just not getting enough calcium in your diet typically. And it's related to maybe a sedentary lifestyle. There's a few things that can play a role in osteoporosis, and we'll talk about that when we get to calcium, the mineral calcium. Oh gosh. To what? I don't know what NENOC is. So they're both out. But yeah, I don't know what the NENOC, oh, both in. Yeah, I don't know what causes that. Yeah, sorry. Did you have one? Yeah, there's various ways. I kind of remember that. Yeah, there's various things that have been tried, especially aimed at children, to try to increase their amounts of vitamin D and calcium, especially because sometimes we don't. There's not the greatest sources of those in a wide variety of foods. So rickets and osteomalacia. Those are the two deficiencies, rickets in children, osteomalacia in adults. And essentially their bones just become weak and bowed out. And that's the lack of, because calcium causes the bones to be more rigid. And essentially if you don't have calcium, then all that's in the bone pretty much is collagen. And collagen is strong, but it's flexible. And so that's why the bones will be a little more flexible. They'll bend really easily if they don't have calcium in them. So here's just another picture of the bowed out legs. I haven't heard that, but I mean, I would say that you got to use them to build strong bones, but there might be like something to that.
I'm talking about like floor condiments.
Oh. And they start developing and mineralizing like that, maybe. Yeah. But it can happen because you just don't have enough calcium in your diet, so you don't have enough vitamin D. All right, so concerns, sunscreen. You don't have too much sunscreen. Living north latitude of 37, like Oregon, where I used to live, a lot of people take vitamin supplements there. Cultures where children and women are covered in clothing. So these are the people that were most elderly who spend all their time indoors or completely covered up when they go outside because they are more susceptible to sun damage. So they tend to wear long clothing. So there's a lot of people susceptible to vitamin D deficiencies. All right, toxicity. So toxicity causes hypercalcemia. Hypercalcemia is also hypervitaminosis D. This one can be really dangerous. Calcium, if you have too much in the body, can start depositing in soft tissues, kidneys, lungs, arteries. This can cause a lot of damage, a lot of problems, hardening of arteries, hardening of the kidney tissue. You don't want calcium to accumulate in your soft tissues. And so that's why the UL was set in order to avoid hypercalcemia, too much calcium depositing in arteries, kidneys, and other soft tissues. All right, two more, vitamin K and vitamin E. So vitamin K, a few different names for vitamin K. Minoquinone is the main form. This is the one that's made by your intestinal bacterial flora. The one we get from plants, if you eat a lot of spinach or kale, is phaloquinone. So phaloquinone and minoquinone, these are the vitamin K forms. There's another synthetic form that we tend to put in supplements called methadione. I don't care if you remember that one or not, but it can be converted to minoquinone. But phaloquinone and minoquinone are the two natural sources of vitamin K. One from plants is phaloquinone, plant. One from gut bacteria is called minoquinone. Both of them we can absorb. The principal role, so for vitamin K, think blood clotting. Essentially, it is a you that all your B vitamins are coenzymes, but not your lipid-soluble vitamins. However, vitamin K is an exception here. It actually does act as a coenzyme. It allows for a modification of clotting factors, allowing them to bind calcium. So they need to bind calcium in order to function as blood clotting factors. So blood clotting factors have to be able to bind calcium. Vitamin K allows those clotting factors to be modified so they can bind calcium. And then they can work as clotting factors. So, yeah. It allows blood clotting. So it doesn't prevent blood clotting, it allows blood to clot. So it binds calcium necessary for factors to interact with, you don't have to remember all this, phospholipid platelets on the blood vessel walls, allowing the blood to clot. So without vitamin K, your blood will not clot. Without vitamin K, your blood cannot coagulate. Coagulation is blood clotting, so coagulation will not occur if you do not have vitamin K. And essentially, these are the details I've written in here, but you don't have to know these details. It's a little excessive, but if you want to know the scientific mechanism, essentially, it's required for gamma carboxylation reactions, allowing for glutamic acid residues to be added to these clotting factors, and these glutamic acid residues are what's going to be able to bind calcium, and then they can cause the clotting factors to become functional. But again, don't memorize these details if you don't want to. Just know that it's really important. Coenzyme allowing clotting factors to bind calcium, allowing them to be activated so that your blood can clot. And this one's not as important, but it is also important for this bone protein osteocalcin. So vitamin K, you often see it in bone supplements because it is important for osteocalcin. Osteocalcin is a protein found in bone, important for developing healthy bones. And so, again, you might see that in bone supplements. It's good to know that vitamin K is important for strong, healthy bones as well. Not as important as vitamin D, but it is still important. But blood clotting is its main, super important function. This is also really important. So this is an important characteristic of vitamin K, warfarin. Warfarin is a rat poison. Coumadins it is a blood thinner, but that's how it works as a rat poison. So warfarin is, another name is coumadin. So coumadins are typically what we call warfarin, coumadin, same thing. This is a prescribed drug. So people who have cardiovascular disease, heart disease risk, that means they have a high risk of blood clotting. And so they need blood thinners. And so in this case, blood thinners, warfarin or coumadins, these guys are just blood thinners. And I don't care, honestly, if you remember. And this is, I think, one of the most common drugs taken in America are coumadins, blood thinners. Because what is the number one killing disease in America is heart disease. And so people are on blood thinners. What do these warfarin or blood thinners do? They prevent vitamin K recycling. So blood thinners prevent vitamin K recycling. And there are a lot of Americans on these drugs. So this is something that is important for you to understand. Your future doctors of the world. This is a pharmaceutical warfarin/coumadins are blood thinners. How do they thin the blood? They thin the blood by preventing vitamin K recycling. If you can't recycle vitamin K, then you're not able to make clotting factors very well. And if you can't make clotting factors, that prevents your blood from clotting, aka thins the blood. So what does thinning the blood mean? It essentially means that your blood can't clot readily. It can't clot very well. So that's what vitamin K or these vitamin K can be recycled, but if you take warfarin or coumadins, then it's going to prevent that vitamin K recycling. severe cardiovascular disease, which means that they've got clots in their blood already, then they could die really easily. And so it's worth it to take this pharmaceutical to them that'll thin their blood and that might prolong their life. So why is a good question for one of them, but I would say if I were a patient and I had severe cardiovascular disease, I would weigh my risk versus benefit ratio, and I might take the drug if I had severe cardiovascular disease and risk of blood clotting. Having said that, there are better blood thinners, like aspirin, baby aspirin, or I would take vitamin E. Vitamin E is a natural anticoagulant as well. Yeah.
So that purpose is like atherosclerosis.
You know what? I really want to have this conversation, Jack. But we can't right now. I mean, I think it's a real, like you're thinking smart. But generally though, I mean, keep in mind, they have a severe risk or increased risk of blood clotting, and they want to do whatever they can to try to reduce the risk of blood clotting. But I agree with you, there's better ways, and we can definitely have this conversation at some point, just not right now. Because I know these guys want to review tomorrow, and we won't be able to do that if I have too much fun with you. So can we like put that on the table for next time? This is what vitamin K does. So you need to allow calcium binding by these are all the clotting factors, 2, 9, 10, there's a lot of clotting factors. And these clotting factors have to be able to bind calcium, but you need vitamin K in order for these gamma carboxylation reactions. Even that you don't need to know, but that's what this is. It's a gamma carboxylation reaction, allowing calcium to be bound by these clotting factors, and now you can actually allow your blood to clot. Because they can bind calcium, and they wouldn't have been able to do that if vitamin K wasn't available. So now they can bind, so they are appropriately hydroxylated or gamma carboxylated to bind calcium. So again, details you don't have to know, but it is kind of interesting if you wanted to go delve into the biochemistry of it. All right, vitamin K, our daily needs. This is another important or interesting characteristic of vitamin K. We have an AI for it. Adequate intake. We do not have enough information to form an RDA. Because our gut bacteria make it, we really don't know how much we need from the diet. So we only have an AI, we do not have an RDA. So again, because our intestinal synthesis is unknown, we don't know how much we need. And it is a wide variety of foods as well, specifically plant foods. It's stored in the liver. All your lipid-soluble vitamins are stored in the liver, A, E, K, and E. And deficiency is rare. It's really only seen if someone is taking, coumadins or warfarin, these guys that prevent vitamin K recycling, and that can increase risk of hemorrhage if you're taking these pharmaceuticals. But if you're a normal, healthy person, not on these pharmaceuticals, then we really don't see deficiencies. It's really not an issue. If you take a lot of antibiotics, you may see a deficiency because, again, it's our gut flora that make a lot of our vitamin K. And newborns. So I had an interesting conversation with a student this morning, or this evening, talking about newborns. So we do give, in America, a prophylactic vitamin K injection to newborns. Why do we do this? It's because essentially clotting factors are made in the liver. The liver is not fully developed when they're born, and so they can't properly make clotting factors, including get enough vitamin K, because remember, newborns also don't have a gut flora yet. So they have to develop their gut flora, they have to develop their liver, and so we give them an injection. Prophylactic means we try to prevent hemorrhage. So to prevent hemorrhagic disease of the newborn, so hemorrhaging is bleeding out, we do give them a prophylactic vitamin K shot. And apparently, I was talking to a student countries where we don't really do that. And if I had more time, I think it's a really interesting conversation to be had as to whether or not we need to give these vitamin K shots, because it may not be necessary. But our medical system, the way it is designed, we currently don't know what else to do. So again, I'm going to table that idea for later, because you guys would rather have a review than us do fun stuff, and I get it. I would too. I would rather have a review and do well on my exam. So one of these days, maybe I'll teach a fun class. All right, vitamin K. No known toxicity, no UL. It is the only one of your lipid-soluble vitamins that doesn't have a UL. We don't know of any toxicity related to vitamin K and this is the only lipid-soluble vitamin. A, E, and K, all the other, not K, all the others, D, that's what it is. A, E, and D all have toxicities, but not vitamin K. Interesting. Most of in America are the warfarin and coumadins. These are called blood thinners, act by inhibiting vitamin K recycling. Also really important to remember. And you must stay consistent with vitamin K in your diet if you're taking coumadins. So a physician, a doctor really needs to follow someone if they are taking these coumadins, because they're really hard to make sure that they are adjusted properly so that the person is getting an appropriate dose of this pharmaceutical for thinning their blood. But they work by inhibiting vitamin K recycling. All right. Last one, vitamin E. All right, so vitamin E has one function. It is a lipid-soluble antioxidant. What is your water-soluble antioxidant that we talked about last week?
C.
Vitamin C. So water-soluble antioxidant from your diet, vitamin C. Vitamin E is the lipid-soluble. So vitamin E works in cell membranes. It prevents oxidation or breakdown of cell membranes. That's its function. A powerful antioxidant in cell membranes. Prevents a lot of things. Essentially, polyunsaturated fatty acids tend to be oxidized really quickly, which means they become bad. I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not the right word. Not bad. But they basically can destroy the cell membrane if you don't have vitamin E in the cell membrane. That wasn't what I'm looking for either. But that's a good word too. But essentially, it prevents oxidation or breakdown of cell membrane. I'll put it that way. And that is its function. And there are some who don't believe that vitamin E should be an essential vitamin, which is another conversation I would really love to have with you guys. But regardless, vitamin C is also important for regenerating vitamin E. So just so you know, these antioxidants help regenerate each other. If you don't have vitamin C, it's going to be hard to regenerate vitamin E. You also need another endogenous antioxidant to recycle these guys. What is the antioxidant that we can make? The amino acid cysteine is really important for creation of this endogenous antioxidant we talked about last week or a couple weeks ago. Glutathione. Glutathione is another really important antioxidant that's made from cysteine, and this one can help regenerate vitamin C and vitamin E. All right, here we go. So what do antioxidants do? They destroy free radicals. Free radicals are produced in many ways, and they can damage proteins, DNA. It's basically a free radical is something that's trying to grab electrons. Just imagine me running around this entire room, smacking people, grabbing your things. I'm going to cause a lot of damage. I can cause a lot of damage. That's what a free radical is. And an antioxidant is someone coming here and just giving me all the stuff, giving me the stuff anyway, and that stops me from moving. So if you give me your stuff, I won't attack you. That's what an antioxidant is. Toddlers. So basically, you have to just relax that free radical, and that is what antioxidants do. They relax free radicals. They actually give them an electron. So if I'm vitamin E and something's coming at me trying to steal, or at things trying to steal electrons, I'm vitamin E, I'm really nice. I'm just going to give that free radical my electron and relax it. And that way it'll stop attacking everything else. That's what free radical or antioxidants do. They give free radicals their electrons. And I, being vitamin E, can still remain calm. Even though something took my electron, that's fine. That's cool. It doesn't matter. It's all good. That's how antioxidants work. They don't get upset about things. They just are cool. So, and they regenerate each other. So here's vitamin E. Vitamin C is going to recycle vitamin E. This is GSH is glutathione is going to recycle vitamin C. So essentially, our antioxidants are recycled. So just because essentially, if I give my electron away as vitamin E, then vitamin C can recycle me. Glutathione can recycle vitamin C. We all help each other out. If we have a lot of antioxidants, we'll help each other out, and we'll get rid of all of the free radicals by being nice to them, not by attacking them. All right, so vitamin C is in a lot of foods. We really don't see deficiencies. It is also stored in the liver. We do see a risk of deficiency, but it's only in children with a genetic defect in alpha tocopherol transfer protein. It's a protein in your liver or your body that can move alpha tocopherol around. And that's the really important vitamin E, is alpha tocopherol. This is the scientific name, alpha tocopherol. So, but really we don't see deficiency that much. I mean, unless someone has a genetic defect. And what is the symptom? It's ataxia. So it's a peripheral neuropathy. This little girl can't feel her legs, and she's having to look her feet while she's walking. She has no sensation in her legs. But again, this is someone who would have a genetic deficiency in the transfer protein that transfers alpha tocopherol around. So no known risk of consuming too much vitamin E from natural sources. I would say this is true for all your vitamins. It doesn't come from excess intake of food. It comes from excess intake of supplements. So we don't see toxicities related to food sources. It really just comes from people taking too much of the supplement. People do take vitamin E for heart disease, which is another interesting conversation I would have with you guys sometime if we wanted to have more fun. But again, don't worry too much about this. It's an antioxidant, and it's also a natural blood thinner. So my graduate dissertation, how I got my doctorate, was I did a study. I was looking at how vitamin E affects vitamin K concentrations. If you take too much vitamin E, that will decrease vitamin K. So vitamin E acts as a natural blood thinner, an anticoagulant. And that's why if you have excess vitamin E, this is why the UL was set. Because overconsumption of supplements can increase risk of hemorrhage. So you could bleed out. We see increased risk of stroke or hemorrhage from hemorrhagic stroke. That's related to vitamin E toxicity. And that's because it interferes with vitamin K function. And I can talk about my graduate dissertation. Smoke vitamin E? I don't know. I guess it depends.
So if we don't know toxicity,
Oh wait, there is a UL. There is a UL. It's 1,000 milligrams. I know that one. I'm sadly by heart. But yeah, there is a UL. I don't know why it's here, but toxicity is hemorrhage. There is a UL. It's 1,000 milligrams. Don't look at those numbers. But that's because of its risk with hemorrhage, bleeding out. You guys think we're done? We're going to start on minerals. We got like 5 minutes left.